The title of this paper is Time-Restricted Feeding Without Reducing Caloric Intake Prevents Metabolic Diseases in Mice Fed a High-Fat Diet. It says that what's varied in this study is not what these mice ate, it was when they ate it. And there were essentially 4 conditions in this study, and the results are absolutely remarkable. What they did is they gave mice access to different types of food. There were 4 groups. One group of mice had access to just a normal mouse diet. And if you allow them to eat that stuff, what's called ad libitum, whenever they want, you just keep it in their food 24 hours a day, they will eat sometimes and then they won't eat at other times. Or in this case, they also had a condition where they gave them mouse chow in a time-restricted way, just for a certain number of hours each day, of about 8 hours. Or they gave them a high-fat diet. That was a separate group, got a high-fat diet at any time they wanted. So this was kind of the carnival for mice, because mice really like high-fat, highly palatable foods, and so they got a lot of goodies and high-fat in their food. And then there was a 4th group that had access to the high-fat diet as much as they wanted to eat, but only during a restricted time period of each 24-hour cycle. Everything I'm going to tell you is true also for humans, and we know this now from human studies. One of the most important things to take away from this study was that mice that ate a highly palatable, high-fat diet, a great-tasting diet, but only during a restricted feeding window of each 24-hour cycle, maintained or lost weight over time. Whereas mice that ingested the same diet, same amount of calories, but had access to those calories around the clock, gained weight, became obese, and quite sick. And as an additional second point, the mice that restricted their feeding window to a particular portion of 8 hours of every 24-hour cycle actually showed some improvement in important health markers. And what was even more incredible is that mice that only ate during a particular feeding window also experienced some reversal of some prior negative health effects. So this study really lit up the world and got people excited about time-restricted eating. When the feeding window falls within the 24-hour cycle, it is very important that the feeding window fall during the more active phase of one's day. So for humans, that's typically in the early part of the day or the later part of the day, but not at night. There are a lot of data now pointing to the fact that eating during the nocturnal phase of the 24-hour cycle is very detrimental to one's health. In fact, when we eat can either enhance our health or can diminish our health. When we see light, can enhance our feelings of well-being or can diminish our feelings of well-being. During the daytime, you want to get as much sunlight and other types of bright light in your eyes as is safely possible, and then you want to avoid light in the middle of the night. It has detrimental dopamine-lowering effects, can cause depression, cortisol increases, etc. So when you view light is as important as the light that you view, and when you eat is as important as what you eat. In this study, they saw something really interesting, which was that not only did restricting food to a particular phase of the 24-hour cycle benefit things like lean body mass and fat loss and a number of health parameters that I'll talk about in a moment, but it also anchored all the gene systems of the body and provided a more regular, stable, so-called circadian rhythm or 24-hour rhythm. You may be surprised to learn that 80% of the genes in your body and brain are on a 24-hour schedule. That is, they change their levels going from high to low and back to high again across the 24-hour cycle. And when those genes are high at the appropriate times and low at the appropriate times, meaning their expression is high and low at the appropriate times, and therefore the proper RNAs and proteins are made because DNA encodes for RNA, RNA is translated into proteins. When that happens, your health benefits. When those genes are not expressed at the right times, when they're high or low at the wrong times of each 24-hour cycle, that's when you get negative health effects. This study showed that when mice restrict their eating to an 8-hour period within the most active phase of their 24-hour cycle, many of the genes that are associated with these so-called circadian clocks, these genes have names like PER, CRY1, etc., those so-called clock genes underwent a very regular entrainment, a locking in to the proper 24-hour schedule. And while this was in mice, we now know that this also occurs in humans. And when we view light is the primary way in which these genes and the clock systems of our body get organized or entrained, meaning matched to the outside light-dark cycle. So viewing light early in the day and in the afternoon, and as much as possible all day, great. Ideally, that's sunlight. Avoiding light in the middle of the night is also great. It's great because it causes the increases in particular genes and the decreases in particular genes in every cell throughout your body at the appropriate times. The second most powerful timekeeper, or Zeitgeber as it's called, is food and when you eat. And in this study, the results they saw underscore this point. What they saw is that the peaks in these clock genes became very regular, and the dips in these clock genes became very regular. And that led to a whole host of really important positive health effects. Conversely, when mice ate whenever they wanted across the 24-hour cycle, these clock genes became really out of whack. And the negative health consequences were the downstream result of these changes in these clock genes. This has now also been shown to be true for humans. So if you want to be healthy, you want your organ health, your metabolic health to be entrained properly, one of the most important things you can do is to view light at the appropriate times of each 24-hour schedule and to not view light at other times of that schedule, and to eat at the appropriate time of each 24-hour day.